If I leaned 1 inch closer in that rain-lit kitchen, would the storm hush my conscience or my heartbeat? If his mouth found mine while his wife slept 200 miles away, would the night forgive us? Hello. I am Nora Park, 67, female, a widow in a quiet Seattle suburb. I spent 36 years as a school librarian, and now I tend roses and cook for neighbors. Across the fence lives Gabriel Lee, 71, retired hardware man. His wife left at dawn for a church trip to Portland. 2 days that felt like a door left ajar. Rain glassed the windows all morning. I ladled chicken barley soup into a lidded bowl, steam lifting like a secret. I rang his bell and he spoke my name through the rain. I set the bowl down and tried not to see how quiet his rooms were. He thanked me with 2 hands. When I turned to go, I noticed a dresser leaning. We slid it straight and laughed like neighbors sharing a small victory. We asked after our children. Phones ring, photos arrive, and the house stays quiet. They are fine and far away. At my sink I washed the bowl and wiped it dry. Though I could have returned it later. I stepped back into the rain. He opened before the second ring. The hallway held the clean scent of cedar. He noticed a thread at my sleeve and smoothed it with a fingertip. "Stay for supper," he said. I slipped off my damp cardigan and hung it over a chair. I mixed scallions with batter and oil hissed in the skillet. He set 2 plates and 2 small cups. No wine, only warm tea. We spoke of scraped knees from another decade, of the summer. Our street flooded and we passed sandbags shoulder to shoulder. When the pancakes browned, we ate with soy and a little vinegar. He said it tasted like a memory. I did not tell him I had pictured this evening on sleepless nights. He reached across and covered my hand with his. Warmth startled me and then settled me. His band shone like a small moon. I said his name and he looked up as if called from a far room. In the window the streetlights blurred into coins. My throat tightened with a feeling I had not dared in 7 years. I stepped closer so slowly even the kettle did not notice. He did. Breath met breath. We kissed the way people do when they have waited too long for gentleness. It was steady and careful. When we drew apart, the world returned in small pieces. A roof drip. "Thank you," he said. "For soup and for company." I dried plates already clean. The rain softened to a mist. He lifted a strand of hair from my cheek and let it fall as if choosing not to cross a line. "Good night, Nora," he said. I carried the empty bowl home and set it on my counter, my palm still warm. I lay awake with the slow wash of the storm. I counted the miles to Portland. I told myself I would not text him first. I did not promise anything about tomorrow. The night after the kiss I tried to sleep. But my body stayed lit like a window left on in heavy rain. My hand kept touching my lips as if the memory were a bruise made of warmth. The house was quiet. The clock moved. My breath stumbled and smoothed and stumbled again. By noon I saw him at the mailboxes. His gray hair was damp. His cardigan was a little wrinkled. He looked up and the air between us turned alert. My name left his mouth as if he were afraid to drop it. I asked if he slept. He asked me the same. We both smiled like people who knew the answer, and still wanted to hear it aloud. His wife would be back after dark. He said it as if reporting the weather. The words rested on my tongue like a key. I told him I had apples from the market. He said he would bring coffee. We walked back along the wet walk in a careful distance that felt like a touch drawn in the air. In my kitchen I rinsed the apples one by one. Water clung to my wrists and slid into the hollow of my palm. He set 2 cups down and stood so near I could feel the heat of his sleeve. "Do not cut yourself," he said. His hand covered mine and stayed. The knife lay harmless while my pulse did not. We sat on the small couch. The window shone with a soft glare. A child shouted somewhere down the block. He told me he had been a good man for a very long time. I told him I had been a faithful woman, and then a widow who learned to carry quiet like a second skin. Our sentences grew shorter. Our breaths grew longer. When his mouth found mine again, the room gentled. We kissed with patience and hunger in the same measure. His breath grazed my cheek. My neck warmed. My back remembered a curve it had not kept in years. We stayed within the slow safety of the couch cushion and the steady edge of the lamp. It felt like the first step off a dock where the water is warm and the body knows the depth by instinct. We paused and looked at each other, with shy wonder that did not fit our ages and yet fit perfectly. He thanked me for coffee that had gone cold. I thanked him for apples we had not touched. The silliness made us brave. He said tomorrow like a question. I answered with a nod that felt like a vow. That evening I walked the block in the drizzle. Porch lights blinked on. The smell of cedar rose from the fences. I told myself to be careful. I told myself that care is sometimes a slow yes. In bed I watched the rain slide in narrow trails down the glass. I counted to 100 and then to 1,000. When I finally slept, my last thought was a soft word. Tomorrow. At dawn I woke before the alarm I no longer needed. My body felt like a letter half written and folded for later. I touched the empty side of the bed and laughed without sound. The sky held a seam. I brewed tea and set 2 cups, though I would drink only 1. I wanted the second cup to wait with me. Waiting can be a kind of courage. Days bent into a quiet pattern that only we could read. A returned dish became a reason. A dead bulb on his porch became another. We learned the timing of the street. The hour her car left. The half hour before choir practice. The 10 minutes when sprinklers tapped the lawns like a cover of rain. I invited him to supper on a Thursday that felt like a doorway. I ironed a linen runner that had waited in a drawer for 7 patient years. He arrived with a simple red wine and hands that could not quite still. I told him to set the table. He asked where I keep the good plates. As if the answer mattered more than oxygen. We both laughed and then fell quiet because it did matter. We spoke the way people do when they know the important parts already. He told me about the hardware store that had carried every hinge and handle a town could need. I told him about the library where every life seemed to walk past my desk. One whispered request at a time. We said the names of our children like small prayers. We did not say the names of our losses. They were already in the room. The wine loosened more than our tongues. He watched me light 2 small candles. The flame lifted like 2 steady breaths. He reached for my hand and held it in both of his. As if he had found a bird that would trust him if he kept very still. The feeling rose through me in a slow warm tide. When we moved to the couch, the house made its ordinary night sounds. A pipe ticked in the wall. A neighbor car pulled in and silenced. I rested my head on his shoulder and let the years fall the way old leaves let go when they are ready. He touched the line of my hair, and then the line of my jaw in a map that felt both new and remembered. We did not rush. We were past the age of rushing. We learned the rhythm of breath and pause and breath again. We found the sweet edge where want meets care. The room seemed to widen around us, and still we were the only thing inside it. My body woke like a book, reopened to a page that knows exactly where the reader left off. Near dawn he dozed in the armchair with a blanket half on and half slipping. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, and felt a steadiness I had not owned in years. When he stirred I tucked the blanket higher. He smiled in his sleep the way children do when wind turns the curtains. We ate toast with jam in the thin morning light. We did not remark on what had changed. We could feel it without telling. When he left he pressed his brow to mine and thanked me. As if gratitude could hold the shape of what we had done. After he went I washed 2 cups and set them to dry. The runner on the table kept a faint crease that made me think of a promise. That night I wrote his name once and closed the notebook. My hands smelled of soap and faint wax. I blew out the ember and stood in the quiet that felt like company. Danger altered the taste of ordinary hours. When his wife returned the street looked the same. Yet every glance carried a second meaning. He waved from the driveway. I waved back. Between the hands in the air ran a live wire of memory. We practiced the craft of caution. We learned how to let silence do the talking. We spoke in small practical phrases and stored whole paragraphs in our eyes. A bag of yard clippings became a screen behind which we stood too near. A shared alley bin gave cover to a brush of fingers. That could be mistaken for accident and was not. One noon she was at a church luncheon. He texted to ask if I needed help with a shelf. I did. He came through the back gate and closed it with slow care. In the kitchen sun he stood behind me while I measured the wall. His breath warmed the shell of my ear. The pencil shook. The line went a little crooked. We both laughed softly and did not step apart. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Does it stop you?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. The words landed with the soft weight of yes. He kissed the place where my shoulder meets my neck. Soap and cedar and something like cinnamon rose between us. The shelf could wait. The measure of us could not. Later we sat with tea as if we were ordinary neighbors. He told me a story about a stubborn bolt that would not turn for a customer until it did. I told him about a boy who returned a book late and brought me a dandelion as a fee. We laughed and then the laughter went quiet and left a tender ache behind. At night I lay awake and counted risks. The way I once counted bills at the library desk. What if she saw? What if a car slowed where it should not? What if we could bear it and go on? Fear and wanting sat side by side like 2 cats on the same chair. Not friends and not enemies. Simply sharing the warm cushion because neither would give it up. On a rainy Thursday he brushed past me in the market aisle where the herbs live. Our sleeves touched. Our hands did not. The scent of basil rose like a story trying to begin. I paid for parsley I did not need, and walked out with a smile I could not smooth. We learned to live inside a narrow window, where everything felt brighter because it might shut at any minute. I cooked a stew and tasted it twice. I put on lipstick for no reason. I pressed my palm to my collarbone and felt the inside drum. It was terror. It was joy. It was both in one sound. I wrote a list one evening and titled it with the quiet word choice. On one side I put harm. On the other I put hunger. Under harm I wrote loss and breach and sorrow. Under hunger I wrote breath and color and the feeling of waking. Mid-life at last, I stared until the columns blurred. Then I set the paper under a pot of rosemary and went to wash my face. The mirror showed a woman both gentler and braver than before. The chance widened like a tide. 3 days, he texted. Tonight. My hands trembled as I dressed. The mirror did not reduce me to years or lines. It showed a woman stepping into her own pulse. He opened the door and warmth spilled out. Rosemary and lamb and music just above a whisper. He had set the table with care. Cloth napkins. Water in a glass that caught the light like a small river. We ate slowly. Our knees found each other under the table and rested without apology. He told me he had fixed a chair and thought of my back. I told him I had watered the roses and thought of his hands. The truth tasted like salt and honey. Later we lay on the long couch and watched the ceiling darken around the edges. His laughter came easier now. Mine too. He kissed me with a patience that felt like reverence. I felt the ache of being seen and the relief of being held. We were not young. We were exactly where the map turned to sea and invited a boat to try its luck. The second day we drove to a market in another neighborhood. He bought plums and asked how to choose the best. The vendor said listen for the soft sound of ripeness. He pressed one to my palm and I knew at once. We walked by the water and said very little. I liked the sound of our steps keeping time. I liked the way he looked at me as if the noon light rose from my face. That evening he stood behind me while I chopped herbs. His hands closed over mine to guide the knife. The herbs gave up their scent. My shoulders lowered. The world narrowed to breath and touch and the board under the blade. We cooked and ate and left the plates. We chose the couch and the quiet and the long slow yes of time. On the third morning the phone rang. She would be back by evening. We both felt the shift. We folded blankets. We watered the small plant he sometimes forgets. We sat at the table with our fingers laced as if we were learning to pray from the start. He pressed his brow to mine and said I had returned a word he feared he had lost. I told him he had given me a life that felt awake. I walked home before dusk. Her car turned the corner as I reached my door. I waved. She waved. The street resumed its habit of being ordinary. In my kitchen I stood very still. I could hear my heart and it was not quiet and it was not ashamed. It said live. It said be careful. It said live again. If you listened this far and felt something stir, leave a gentle word below. Your small line may give someone courage. If a friend or a sister comes to mind, share this story with them. No one should carry heavy nights alone. Health cannot be bought with money. But you can choose to follow and subscribe now, and you can set the bell, so you do not miss what may help you tomorrow. Thank you for walking this little road with me. Small steps today can change tomorrow. See you next time. Stay healthy and keep a day of grace.